David Olusoga is a British-Nigerian historian, author, presenter, and BAFTA-winning filmmaker. He is Professor of Public History at the University of Manchester, a columnist for The Observer. He also writes for The Guardian, is on the board of the Scott Trust, which is the charity that owns The Guardian, The New Statesman, The Voice, BBC History Magazine. He presents the long-running BBC series A House Through Time, and wrote and presented the award-winning series Black and British, A Forgotten History, and the BAFTA-winning Britain's Forgotten Slave Owners, and was one of the presenters on the landmark series Civilizations, and produced the first ever documentary that I made for TV for Channel 4. Yeah. So it's wonderful to have you here, David. Let's take a look back at your MacTaggart.
This ideal black guy was someone my colleague would hang out with. He'd come round their house and listen to music in perfect racial harmony. As this piece of advice went on, and I learnt more biographical details of this ideal black person, I began to wonder if perhaps the reason they were so unthreatening, so relaxed and so laid back, might have been because the black person I was being urged to emulate was my colleague's cannabis dealer. Don't know stuff. Don't have opinions that clash with mine. Don't challenge me or my presumptions. Be the sort of black person I'm comfortable with. Be more like a drug dealer. That is what I was told by a colleague in our industry. The generation that is leading this global shift in consciousness and for whom these principles are sacred is also a generation that our industry is at risk of losing. They are a generation we have yet to convince of the lessons I learnt in my childhood, of the magical, transformative, educative power of public service broadcasting. This is a generation to whom we have yet to demonstrate our relevance. We can do that by listening to them on this and other issues.
I've got to be honest, David, your MacTaggart lecture affected me quite profoundly and emotionally. And it really struck me how brave it was of you to give so generously of your personal experiences and struggles in service of your clear passion for improving our industry, for making things better for another generation. I know you've written and talked about parts of your life experience before, but did it feel different, and how did it affect you to share in that way on that platform?
I think it's very much about the context of the summer of 2020. When I was asked to give the MacTaggart, like Amanda said, it's an enormous honour, but it was also, there was a trap of being dishonest, because to talk about these issues around race, diversity, inclusivity, and not talk about my personal experiences would have been profoundly dishonest. And so once I accepted the offer, it was natural, inevitable that I would have to talk personally. So in some ways, there was no option. And also that summer, that moment, was people were having discussions that hadn't been had. Also, I have to say that the main force that made me feel that I had to be honest, I had to talk about my own experiences, was my predecessor, Michaela Cole. The honesty and the personal introspection that was part of my MacTaggart was as nothing compared to what she discussed. But I think Michaela, if someone was going to write a history of the MacTaggart lecture, I think Michaela would be the line in the sand. She was somebody who showed it could have another function, that it could be a moment when the industry looks in the mirror at itself, if people are willing to be personal and expose themselves.
What was the impact on you among colleagues in the industry? It really did cut through into the mainstream, and people who don't work in TV were talking about your MacTaggart. How did you experience that?
I mean, the most profound thing was that in the weeks after, I was contacted by dozens of people of colour and other minority groups. Some of them I knew, some of them who'd left the industry, some people I didn't know, who all wanted to say the same thing, that my experiences reflected their experiences. Now, in some ways, that's a vindication, but in some ways it's profoundly depressing that my personal experiences spoke to the experiences that they had. Now, some of these people have gone on and left our industry. Some of them are household names because they've had huge success in other arenas of life. And they are all people that we lost because we have historically failed to address these issues of diversity and inclusion. So, I mean, being vindicated about something which is depressing is not the sort of vindication I prefer. But that was the most profound experience, is those conversations on email, over the phone in the weeks that followed.
Do you think that we ask too much of an individual to take that big stage and platform, to share personally, as you all have done, and to rely on that act really of generosity and public service to shift things within our industry? It is a huge ask.
It is, but as Amanda said, it's also a huge honour. And I have to admit, when I was approached, my first reaction was to run away. But as I said, it was the summer of 2020. It was a moment, and I do think it will be looked back as an historic line in the sand, where people were having conversations, much more difficult conversations than the one I delivered, where things were being said that had been unsaid. And I felt, I had the force of history on my back. This was a moment to speak truth to power. This was a moment for individuals, organizations, institutions, whole sectors to be introspective, to ask difficult questions. And if that was a big ask of me, it was many other people were making much more, exposing themselves in much more dangerous ways. I do think it's a remarkable and unique platform in this industry. And as I said, I think Michaela showed that it could be used in a way that it historically hadn't been.
Thank you so much, David.